As you take your first breath this morning, a startling realization settles in. Nothing will ever be the same. The air feels heavier, as if the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for you to notice the subtle shift beneath the surface of your ordinary life. You sit up, the sheets tangled around your legs, and for a moment you sense a presence in the room. Not a person, but a question, ancient and insistent, pressing against the walls of your mind. It is the kind of question that does not ask for an answer, but demands a reckoning. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that every rule you have ever followed, every expectation you have ever internalized, was written by someone else's hand. Picture yourself opening your eyes to a world where the boundaries between right and wrong, possible and impossible, are not fixed lines but shifting sands, drawn and redrawn by invisible forces. You find yourself standing at the edge of a new reality, the truth dawning on you all at once. The life you have been living is not entirely your own. The shape of your days, the rhythm of your thoughts, the very architecture of your desires, how much of it is truly yours, and how much has been constructed, brick, by the world around you. Suddenly, you're faced with a moment that makes you question everything you thought you knew. The familiar comfort of certainty slips away, replaced by a cold, exhilarating sense of possibility. What if the things you have always accepted, the rules, the roles, the stories, are not immutable laws, but fragile agreements held together by nothing more than collective belief? What if rebellion is not an act of destruction, but a search for authenticity, a desperate, beautiful attempt to reclaim the self from the machinery of conformity? As you sit in the half-light of dawn, you feel the paradox at the heart of your existence, the longing to belong, and the equally powerful urge to break free. You remember the first time you felt the sting of injustice, the first time you questioned a teacher, a parent, a priest, or a politician. The first time you wondered, why should I obey? The memory is sharp, electric, a moment of clarity that cut through the fog of obedience. But just as quickly, you recall the fear that followed, the fear of punishment, of exile, of being cast out from the warmth of the tribe. The fear that rebellion, for all its promise, might lead only to loneliness and loss. Why do you feel this tension so acutely? Why does the call to rebellion echo so powerfully in your chest, even as you shrink from its consequences? Is it possible that the very act of questioning is woven into the fabric of your being, a spark passed down through generations of ancestors who dared to defy? Or is it a dangerous illusion, a seductive whisper that leads only to chaos and ruin? You look around your room at the objects that define your daily life. The phone on your nightstand, the clothes folded neatly in your dresser, the books lined up on your shelf. Each one is a testament to the world's expectations, a silent reminder of the roles you are meant to play. But beneath the surface, you sense another reality, a hidden current of resistance, a secret longing to shatter the script and write your own story. What would happen if you answered that longing? What would it mean to rebel, not just against authority, but against the deepest assumptions that shape your identity? Could you bear the weight of true freedom, or would it crush you beneath its infinite possibilities? Is rebellion an act of courage or a form of madness? Is it the path to self-realization or the road to self-destruction? The questions multiply, each one more unsettling than the last. If you are not the author of your own life, who is? If the rules are arbitrary, why do you obey them? If rebellion is inevitable, why does it terrify you? And if you choose to remain silent, to accept the world as it is, what part of yourself do you sacrifice in the process? You remember stories of rebels, some celebrated, others condemned. The revolutionary who toppled a tyrant, only to become a tyrant himself. The artist who broke every rule, only to be forgotten by history. The philosopher who questioned everything, only to find himself lost in a labyrinth of doubt. Their lives are cautionary tales and beacons of hope, warnings and invitations all at once. What separates the rebel who changes the world from the one who is destroyed by it? Is there a secret, a hidden law that governs the psychology of rebellion? As you ponder these questions, you feel the ground shifting beneath your feet. The world you thought you knew is dissolving, revealing a deeper, more complex reality. You realize that rebellion is not a single act, but a process, a journey into the unknown, guided by a restless hunger for truth, It is a force that can liberate or destroy, create or annihilate, depending on how you wield it. But what is the source of this force? Where does the urge to rebel come from, and why does it manifest so differently in each person? Is it a response to oppression, a reaction to injustice, or something more primal, a fundamental aspect of human nature, as essential as the need for food or love? And if so, what does that say about the world we have built, a world that demands obedience even as it breeds dissent? You feel the weight of history pressing down on you, the countless generations who have struggled with these same questions, who have fought and died for the right to define themselves. You sense their presence in the room, a silent chorus urging you to look deeper, to question more fiercely, to refuse the easy answers. Their voices are a reminder that rebellion is not just a personal struggle, but a collective one, a battle fought in the hearts and minds of every human being. Yet, for all its power, rebellion is a lonely path. To question is to stand apart, to risk alienation and misunderstanding. It is to accept the possibility of failure, of ridicule, of being cast out from the safety of the herd. And yet, you cannot ignore the call. It is a fire that burns in your chest, a voice that will not be silenced. What if the greatest rebellion is not against the world, but against yourself, against the parts of you that crave comfort, certainty, and approval? What if true freedom lies not in the destruction of external authority, but in the mastery of your own mind? Can you rebel against your own conditioning, your own fears, your own limitations? Or are you forever trapped in a cycle of resistance and submission, doomed to repeat the same patterns over and over again? As the sun rises outside your window, casting long shadows across the floor, you realize that the real question is not whether to rebel, but how. How do you distinguish between rebellion that is necessary and rebellion that is self-destructive? How do you know when to fight and when to surrender? How do you navigate the thin line between courage and recklessness, between authenticity and alienation? The paradox deepens. To rebel is to risk everything, but to submit is to lose yourself. Is there a way to reconcile these opposing forces, to find a path that honors both your need for belonging and your hunger for freedom? Or is the tension itself the point, a crucible in which your true self is forged? You feel the urgency of the moment, the sense that something vital is at stake. The world is changing, old certainties are crumbling, and the future is uncertain. In this time of upheaval, the psychology of rebellion is not an abstract question, but a matter of survival. Will you adapt, conform, and disappear into the crowd? Or will you dare to stand alone, to question, to challenge, to create? As you rise from your bed, the question lingers in the air, unresolved and insistent. It is a question that will follow you through the day, haunting your thoughts, shaping your choices. It is the great question at the heart of every human life. Will you accept the world as it is, or will you dare to imagine something different? The answer is not yet clear. The journey has only just begun. But one thing is certain, nothing will ever be the same. And so, with your heart pounding and your mind ablaze, you step into the unknown, drawn forward by the promise of a deeper truth, a truth that lies hidden beneath the surface of rebellion, waiting to be discovered. You step into the day, the echo of that great question still reverberating in your chest. The world outside seems unchanged. Cars hum along the street. Neighbors exchange polite greetings. The machinery of daily life grinds on. Yet beneath the surface, you sense a hidden current, a silent tension that shapes every interaction, every unspoken rule. You begin to wonder, what is this force that compels so many to obey, even when their hearts whisper dissent? Why does rebellion feel both necessary and forbidden, both a birthright and a betrayal? To understand, you must look deeper, beyond the surface of society, into the labyrinth of the human mind. Here, in the shadowy corridors of psychology and philosophy, the roots of rebellion twist and tangle, nourished by forces older than civilization itself. You recall the words of Carl Jung, who spoke of the collective unconscious, a vast subterranean realm where the archetypes of hero and outcast, tyrant and rebel, wage their eternal war. Jung saw rebellion not as a mere social act, but as a psychic necessity, a confrontation with the shadow within. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, he wrote. To rebel, then, is to face the parts of yourself that you have been taught to deny. The anger, the longing, the wildness that civilization demands you suppress. But why must these parts be suppressed at all? Why does society fear the rebel, even as it secretly admires them? Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher of will and transgression, offers a clue. He saw the world as a battleground between the herd and the overman, between those who seek safety in conformity and those who dare to create their own values. He who cannot obey himself will be commanded, Nietzsche warned. That is the nature of living creatures. In his eyes, rebellion is not just a reaction to oppression, but a creative act, a refusal to let the world define you, a declaration that your life is your own. Yet this act comes at a cost. Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher of pessimism, saw the human will as a source of endless suffering, a blind, insatiable force that drives us to rebel against our own limitations, only to find new forms of bondage. Man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills, Schopenhauer observed. The urge to rebel, then, is both a blessing and a curse, a sign of our freedom and a reminder of its limits. You begin to see the hidden problem. Rebellion is not simply a matter of breaking rules, but of confronting the deepest contradictions of the self. You are torn between the desire to belong and the need to be free, between the comfort of certainty and the terror of possibility. This tension is not an accident, but a feature of the human condition, a wound that never fully heals. Society, for its part, is built on the management of this wound. From childhood, you are taught to obey, to sit still, to raise your hand, to color inside the lines. The rules are presented as natural, inevitable, even moral, but beneath the surface, you sense the machinery at work, the subtle rewards for compliance, the quiet punishments for dissent. You learn to police yourself, to silence the voice of rebellion before it can speak. Over time, the boundaries between your true desires and the expectations of others blur, until you can no longer tell where one ends and the other begins. Aldous Huxley, in his vision of a brave new world, saw this process taken to its logical extreme, a society so efficient at managing rebellion that its citizens no longer even feel the urge to resist. The greatest triumphs of propaganda have been accomplished, not by doing something, but by refraining from doing, Huxley wrote. Great is truth, but still greater, from a practical point of view, is silence about truth. In such a world, rebellion becomes not just dangerous, but unthinkable, a relic of a more chaotic, more human past. Yet the urge persists. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist, argued that rebellion is the inevitable consequence of freedom. Man is condemned to be free, he declared. Condemned because he did not create himself, yet in spite of that, everything he does is his own responsibility. To be human is to be thrown into a world not of your own making. Forced to choose, to act, to define yourself in the face of absurdity. Rebellion for Sartre is not a luxury, but a necessity, a refusal to let the world dictate the meaning of your existence. But this freedom is a heavy burden. Viktor Frankl, survivor of the concentration camps and chronicler of the search for meaning, saw rebellion as a response to suffering, a way of asserting one's dignity in the face of overwhelming odds. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves, Frankl wrote. In the darkest moments, rebellion becomes an act of hope, a refusal to surrender the last inviolable freedom, the freedom to choose your own attitude. You begin to see how these philosophical currents flow together, shaping the psychology of rebellion. It is not simply a matter of politics or power, but of identity, of who you are and who you are allowed to become. The hidden problem is not just that society demands obedience, but that it does so by shaping your very sense of self. The rebel is not just an enemy of the state, but a threat to the fragile consensus that holds reality together. This is why rebellion feels so dangerous, so exhilarating, so necessary. It is a confrontation with the deepest forces that shape your mind, the inherited fears, the internalized rules, the silent agreements that govern your life. To rebel is to risk everything, to step into the unknown, to become a stranger to yourself. But the roots of rebellion go even deeper. Neuroscience reveals that the brain is wired for both conformity and dissent. Mirror neurons, those mysterious cells that allow you to feel what others feel, make it possible to empathize, to belong, to share in the collective life of the tribe. But other circuits, those that govern risk, novelty, and reward, drive you to explore, to question, to push against the boundaries of the known. The tension between these forces is not a flaw, but a feature, a dynamic equilibrium that allows societies to adapt, to innovate, to survive. Yet this equilibrium is fragile. When the pressure to conform becomes too great, the urge to rebel grows stronger, seeking an outlet. Sometimes it erupts in violence, in revolution, in the shattering of old orders. Other times it takes subtler forms, a work of art, a whispered secret, a private act of defiance. But always, beneath the surface, the struggle continues. You begin to notice the signs of this struggle all around you. The teenager who dyes her hair a forbidden color, the worker who questions a pointless rule, the artist who dares to imagine a different world. Each act of rebellion, no matter how small, is a crack in the facade, a reminder that the machinery of conformity is never complete, never absolute. But you also see the cost. The rebel is often isolated, misunderstood, punished. The price of authenticity is high, and many choose the safety of silence. You wonder, is it possible to rebel without destroying yourself? Can you find a way to honor your own truth without being cast out from the world? The philosophers offer no easy answers. Jung warns that the shadow, if denied, will erupt in destructive ways. Nietzsche urges you to create your own values, but offers no guarantee of happiness. Schopenhauer reminds you that the will is a source of suffering, even as it drives you to rebel. Huxley shows you a world where rebellion is anesthetized. Sartre insists on the burden of freedom. Frankl finds meaning in resistance to suffering. You realize that the hidden problem is not just external, but internal. A battle between the parts of yourself that long for safety and those that hunger for freedom. The psychology of rebellion is the psychology of the divided self, the eternal struggle to reconcile the need to belong with the need to be true. As the day unfolds, you feel the weight of this struggle in every choice you make. Do you speak your mind or hold your tongue? Do you follow the script or improvise your own lines? Do you accept the world as it is or dare to imagine something different? The tension builds, unresolved. You sense that the consequences of this hidden problem are deeper than you realized, that the cost of silence, of obedience, may be greater than you are willing to pay. But what are those consequences? How does the psychology of rebellion shape not just individuals but entire societies? What happens when the urge to rebel is suppressed, or when it erupts unchecked? The answers lie just beyond your grasp, shimmering on the horizon. You feel the pull of the next question, the next revelation, the next step on the journey. The hidden problem has been revealed, but its consequences remain to be explored. And so, with a sense of urgency growing in your chest, you move forward, deeper into the labyrinth, searching for the unseen forces that shape your life, your mind, your world. You move through the day, the hidden problem gnawing at the edges of your awareness. The world appears unchanged, but now you see it with new eyes. Every gesture, every silence, every unspoken rule is charged with meaning. The tension between conformity and rebellion is not just a private struggle. It is the silent architect of your reality, shaping the contours of your thoughts, your relationships, your very sense of what is possible. You begin to notice the subtle ways in which the psychology of rebellion and its suppression seeps into every corner of life. It is there in the way people lower their voices when speaking of forbidden things, in the nervous laughter that follows a risky joke, in the careful calculation behind every act of self-expression. It is there in the way you hesitate before voicing a dissenting opinion, in the way you edit yourself before you even speak. The machinery of conformity is invisible, but its effects are everywhere. You recall the findings of social psychology, the famous experiments of Solomon Asch, in which ordinary people, confronted with the unanimous opinion of a group, will deny the evidence of their own senses rather than stand alone. You remember Stanley Milgram's chilling studies, where participants, urged on by an authority figure, delivered what they believed were lethal shocks to strangers, The lesson is clear. The pressure to obey is not just external, but internalized, woven into the fabric of your mind. But what happens when the urge to rebel is stifled? When the voice of dissent is silenced? The consequences are not always dramatic. No riots in the streets, no banners waving in the wind. More often the effects are subtle, insidious, unfolding in the quiet desperation of everyday life. You see it in the way people shrink from their own potential, in the dreams abandoned for the sake of security, in the talents left undeveloped because they do not fit the mold. You see it in the way creativity withers under the weight of expectation, in the way curiosity is replaced by cynicism, in the way hope gives way to resignation. The suppression of rebellion is not just a political act, but a psychological one, a slow erosion of the self. Cognitive biases play their part, reinforcing the status quo. The confirmation bias leads you to seek out information that supports what you already believe, to dismiss evidence that challenges your assumptions. The authority bias inclines you to trust those in power, to defer to their judgment even when it contradicts your own experience. The bandwagon effect draws you toward the safety of the majority, making it easier to go along than to stand apart. These biases are not flaws, but adaptations, strategies for survival in a world where belonging is often a matter of life and death. But they come at a cost. Over time, the habit of obedience becomes second nature, and the capacity for independent thought atrophies. The rebel within is not destroyed, but buried, entombed beneath layers of habit and fear. You begin to see how this process shapes not just individuals, but entire societies. When rebellion is suppressed, innovation stalls, injustice festers, and the machinery of oppression grinds on unchecked. The greatest atrocities of history, the Holocaust, the gulags, the killing fields, were made possible not just by the cruelty of a few, but by the obedience of the many. The lesson is as old as humanity. When the voice of rebellion is silenced, the consequences are catastrophic. But the effects are not always so extreme. More often, the unseen consequences of suppressed rebellion are measured in smaller, quieter tragedies. The life unlived, the truth unspoken, the love never confessed. You see it in the way people drift through their days, numbed by routine, haunted by a vague sense of dissatisfaction they cannot name. You see it in the epidemic of anxiety and depression, in the rising tide of loneliness and despair. The cost of obedience is not just the loss of freedom, but the loss of meaning. Yet the urge to rebel does not disappear. It goes underground, finding expression in unexpected ways. Sometimes it erupts in self-destructive behavior, addiction, sabotage, the quiet violence of self-hatred. Sometimes it takes the form of passive resistance, procrastination, disengagement, the slow withdrawal of energy and attention. Sometimes it is channeled into art, into humor, into the subversive pleasures of irony and satire. You begin to see rebellion everywhere, hidden in plain sight. It is there in the graffiti scrawled on a bathroom wall, in the protest song whispered under the breath, in the secret diary kept beneath the mattress. It is there in the child who refuses to eat her vegetables, in the worker who calls in sick for no reason, in the lover who dares to say no. Each act, however small, is a crack in the facade, a reminder that the machinery of conformity is never complete. But the consequences of rebellion are not always negative. When harnessed wisely, the urge to rebel can be a source of creativity, resilience, and growth. It is the engine of progress, the spark that ignites revolutions, the force that drives humanity forward. Every great advance in science, art, and politics has begun as an act of rebellion, a refusal to accept the world as it is, a demand for something better. Yet the line between constructive and destructive rebellion is thin and easily crossed. When the urge to rebel is denied healthy outlets, it festers, turning inward or lashing out in violence. When it is indulged without reflection, it can become nihilistic, tearing down without building anything in its place. The challenge is not to suppress rebellion, but to channel it, to find ways of dissenting that are creative rather than destructive, transformative rather than merely oppositional. You see this challenge playing out all around you. In the workplace, where innovation is prized but true dissent is punished. In the classroom, where curiosity is encouraged until it threatens the curriculum. In the family, Where love is conditional on obedience, the message is clear. Rebel, but only within the boundaries we set. Question, but not too much. Create, but do not disrupt. The result is a culture of managed rebellion, where the forms of dissent are permitted, even celebrated, but their substance is neutered. The rebel becomes a brand, a style, a commodity to be bought and sold. The energy of rebellion is harnessed, domesticated, turned into fuel for the very system it once sought to overthrow. You feel the urgency of escaping this unseen trap. The cost of silence is too high, the price of obedience too steep. You sense that something vital is at stake, not just your own freedom, but the future of the world. The machinery of conformity is powerful, but it is not invincible. The cracks are already showing, the pressure building, the possibility of change shimmering on the horizon. But how to break free? How to distinguish between rebellion that is necessary and rebellion that is self-destructive? How to find a path that honors both your need for belonging and your hunger for freedom? The answers are not yet clear, but the questions grow more urgent with each passing day. You begin to imagine what it would mean to reclaim the power of rebellion, not as an act of destruction, but as a process of creation. What if you could learn to question without fear, to dissent without hatred, to challenge without destroying? What if rebellion could be a form of love, a commitment to truth, to justice, to the possibility of a better world? The consequences of suppressed rebellion are all around you, shaping the world in ways both visible and invisible. But so too are the seeds of transformation, waiting to be nurtured, to be brought into the light. The challenge is to see beyond the surface, to recognize the hidden forces at work, to find the courage to act. As the day draws to a close, you feel the weight of these unseen consequences pressing in on you. The world is not as it seems. The boundaries between conformity and rebellion are porous, shifting, alive. The machinery of obedience is powerful, but the urge to rebel is older, deeper, more resilient than you ever imagined. You sense that a breakthrough is near, a moment of clarity, a radical shift in perspective that will change everything. The journey is not yet over. The most important questions remain unanswered, but you are closer now, the path ahead illuminated by the flickering light of rebellion. And so you wait, poised on the edge of revelation, ready to take the next step. The unseen consequences have been revealed, their urgency undeniable. The time has come to break free, to discover how rebellion, wisely wielded, can become a force for liberation, for transformation, for hope. You stand at the threshold, the weight of unseen consequences pressing against your chest. The world you once accepted as immutable now appears fragile, its rules exposed as inventions, its boundaries as invitations. The urge to rebel, once a whisper, now roars within you, a force demanding not just release but direction. The question is no longer whether to rebel, but how. You sense that the answer will not be found in the old patterns of resistance. The world is littered with the wreckage of rebellions that destroyed but did not create, that raged against the machine only to become new machines themselves. You feel the need for a different kind of rebellion. A rebellion that is not merely reaction, but revolution. Not just the breaking of chains, but the forging of new possibilities. To break free, you must first break the spell of inevitability. The world is not as fixed as it seems. Every law, every custom, every expectation is the result of choices made by people no wiser, no more deserving than you. The first act of rebellion is to see the world as it truly is, contingent, constructed, open to change. This is the radical shift in perspective that all true rebels share. The ability to look at what everyone else takes for granted and see, not fate, but opportunity. You remember the words of Nietzsche, "Become who you are." The rebel's task is not to destroy the self, but to discover it, to strip away the layers of conditioning, the inherited fears, the borrowed dreams, until only the essential remains. This is not an easy path. It requires the courage to confront your own shadow, to face the parts of yourself that you have been taught to deny. It means questioning not just the world, but your place within it. You begin by noticing the small rebellions, the moments when you catch yourself about to say yes and instead say no, when you choose honesty over comfort, when you risk being misunderstood rather than betray your own truth. These are the seeds of freedom, the first cracks in the armor of conformity. Each act of authenticity, however small, is a declaration of independence, a refusal to let the world define you. But rebellion is not a solitary act. The myth of the lone rebel standing against the world is seductive but incomplete. True rebellion is relational. It is forged in the crucible of community, in the friction between self and other. You seek out those who share your hunger for truth, your impatience with the status quo. You find your tribe not of blood but of spirit. Together, you create spaces where dissent is not just tolerated but celebrated, where the rules are not imposed from above but negotiated from within. You look to history for guidance, for examples of those who have broken free. You see the suffragettes chaining themselves to the gates of power, demanding a voice. You see the civil rights marchers, arms linked, facing down hatred with dignity and resolve. You see the artists and poets and dreamers who dared to imagine a world that did not yet exist, and in doing so brought it into being. Their rebellions were not always loud or violent. Sometimes they were as quiet as a refusal, as gentle as a question. But always they were acts of creation, of making space for something new. You realize that the most powerful rebellions are those that begin within. Viktor Frankl, in the darkness of the camps, discovered that the last of human freedoms is the ability to choose one's attitude, to find meaning even in suffering. His rebellion was not against the guards or the fences, but against despair itself. In choosing hope, he reclaimed his humanity, and in doing so, offered a blueprint for liberation. You begin to see that rebellion is not just about saying no, but about saying yes. Yes to possibility, yes to uncertainty, yes to the risk of becoming. It is the willingness to step into the unknown, to let go of the familiar, to trust that something better is possible. This is the counterintuitive truth at the heart of all great revolutions. The most radical act is not to destroy, but to create. You practice this new rebellion in your daily life. You question the routines that no longer serve you, the beliefs that keep you small, the relationships that demand your silence. You experiment with new ways of being, new ways of seeing. You allow yourself to fail, to be foolish, to begin again. Each act of courage, each moment of vulnerability, is a step toward freedom. You learn to distinguish between rebellion that is reactive and rebellion that is generative. The former is fueled by anger, by the need to prove yourself against an enemy. The latter is fueled by love, by the desire to bring something beautiful into the world. You realize that the most enduring revolutions are those that are rooted in compassion, in the recognition of our shared humanity. You look around and see others waking up, shaking off the dust of obedience, daring to imagine something different. You see movements rising, not just to tear down but to build up, to create new forms of community, new ways of living, new stories to live by. You see the power of collective action, the magic that happens when people come together in pursuit of a common dream. You understand now that rebellion is not a destination, but a practice, a way of being in the world. It is the willingness to question, to risk, to change. It is the refusal to accept the world as it is, and the courage to imagine what it could be. It is the daily act of choosing authenticity over approval, truth over comfort, possibility over resignation. You feel the power of this realization coursing through you, a sense of agency, of responsibility, of hope. You are no longer a passive recipient of the world's rules, but an active participant in its creation. You see that every choice you make, every word you speak, every boundary you draw, is an act of rebellion, a vote for the kind of world you want to live in. You remember the words of Jean-Paul Sartre, "Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you." The past cannot be changed, but the future is unwritten. You are the author of your own story, the architect of your own fate. The world may try to shape you, to contain you, to silence you, but the final word is yours. You look back at the journey you have taken, the questions asked, the truths uncovered, the illusions shattered. You see that rebellion is not an escape from reality, but a deeper engagement with it. It is the willingness to see things as they are and to act anyway. It is the courage to hope, even when hope seems foolish. You realize that the greatest rebellion is to live fully, to love fiercely, to refuse the comfort of cynicism. It is to stand in the light of your own truth, even when the world demands your silence. It is to create, to build, to nurture, to leave the world a little freer, a little kinder, a little more beautiful than you found it. As you move forward, you carry with you the lessons of those who have come before, the rebels, the dreamers, the creators. You honor their struggles, their sacrifices, their victories and defeats. You add your own voice to the chorus of dissent, your own vision to the tapestry of possibility. You know now that rebellion is not a solitary act but a shared journey, a dance between self and world, between the old and the new, between what is and what could be. You embrace the uncertainty, the risk, the promise of transformation. You are ready to break free, not just from the chains that bind you, but from the fear that keeps you small. You are ready to claim your place in the unfolding story of humanity, to shape the world in the image of your deepest values. The time has come to rebel, not in anger, but in hope, not in destruction, but in creation, not alone, but together. And as you take your next step, you feel the ground shift beneath your feet, the old certainties crumbling, the new possibilities rising. The rebellion has begun, and nothing will ever be the same. But what is the ultimate truth that lies beyond rebellion? What is the final, most powerful realization that awaits those who dare to break free? The answer is close now, shimmering at the edge of awareness, ready to reveal itself to those who are willing to see. You move forward, heart pounding, mind ablaze, drawn by the promise of a deeper freedom, a freedom that transcends rebellion, that redefines what it means to be alive. You move through the world transformed, the old boundaries behind you, the taste of rebellion still sharp on your tongue. The air feels different now, charged with possibility, heavy with the knowledge that you are no longer a passive observer, but a participant in the shaping of reality. Yet as you walk this new path, a deeper question emerges, one that lingers in the silence after every act of defiance, every moment of creation. What lies beyond rebellion? What is the ultimate truth that waits on the far side of freedom? You sense that the answer is not what you expected. Rebellion, for all its power, is not an end but a beginning, a doorway, not a destination. The act of breaking free, of questioning, of refusing to accept the world as it is, opens up a vast and uncharted territory. But what do you do with this freedom? How do you live when the old rules no longer bind you, when the scripts have been torn up and the stage is yours to command? You stand at the edge of this new reality, the weight of possibility pressing in on you. The paradox returns. Freedom is exhilarating, but it is also terrifying. The comfort of certainty is gone, replaced by the dizzying responsibility of choice. You are no longer defined by what you reject, but by what you create. The world waits for your answer, and the silence is deafening. You remember the words of Viktor Frankl, echoing in the quiet, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. The ultimate truth is not found in rebellion itself, but in what comes after, in the choices you make, the meaning you create, the life you build from the ashes of the old. You realize now that the final act of rebellion is not against the world, but against the illusion of separation. The boundaries you once saw as absolute between self and other, between rebel and conformist, between freedom and belonging, begin to dissolve. You see that every act of rebellion is also an act of connection, a reaching out towards something greater than yourself. The urge to break free is at its core a longing to belong, to be seen, to be known, to be part of a story that is larger than any individual life. You look back at the journey you have taken, the questions that haunted you, the truths you uncovered, the illusions you shattered. You see that every step was necessary, every doubt a doorway, every act of courage a bridge to something deeper. The ultimate truth is not a single revelation, but a process, a continual unfolding, a dance between self and world, between the known and the unknown. You begin to understand that the final, most powerful realization is this: true freedom is not the absence of constraints, but the ability to choose which constraints you will embrace. Every act of creation, every relationship, every commitment is a form of self-chosen limitation, a way of giving shape to the infinite, of turning possibility into reality. The rebel who refuses all limits is not free but lost. It is only by choosing, by committing, by saying yes to something greater than yourself that you become truly free. You see this truth reflected in the lives of those who have come before you, the artists who devoted themselves to their craft, the lovers who pledged themselves to each other, the activists who gave their lives to a cause. Their freedom was not the freedom to do anything, but the freedom to do what mattered most. Their rebellion was not against all authority, but against the forces that would prevent them from living in accordance with their deepest values. You realize that the final rebellion is an act of love, a love that is fierce, uncompromising, and generative. It is the willingness to give yourself to something beyond your own comfort, to risk failure, to embrace vulnerability, to build rather than destroy. It is the courage to say yes to life, even in the face of uncertainty, even when the outcome is unknown. You feel the weight of this realization settle in your bones, a sense of peace, of clarity, of purpose. The world is still uncertain, still dangerous, still full of suffering and injustice. But you are no longer paralyzed by fear, no longer trapped by the need for approval or the terror of rejection. You are free, not because you have escaped all constraints, but because you have chosen the ones that give your life meaning. You look around and see others on the same journey, each one wrestling with their own questions, their own doubts, their own longing for freedom. You see that the ultimate truth is not a solitary achievement, but a shared discovery, a collective act of creation, a weaving together of individual lives into a tapestry of meaning. The final rebellion is not against the world, but for it, a commitment to building a reality in which everyone has the chance to become who they are. You remember the words of Jean-Paul Sartre, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." The responsibility is immense, but so is the possibility. You are the author of your own story, but you are also a character in the stories of others. Your choices ripple outward, shaping the world in ways you cannot predict. The ultimate truth is not a destination, but a journey, a continual process of becoming, of questioning, of creating. You feel the urge to act, to build, to love. The rebellion that once burned as anger now glows as hope, a steady flame, a guiding light. You see that the world is not fixed, not finished, not beyond redemption. Every day is an invitation to rebel anew, not by tearing down, but by building up, not by rejecting, but by embracing, not by fleeing, but by returning. You understand now that the final, most powerful realization is this: the true rebel is not the one who stands alone, but the one who stands with others. The ultimate act of rebellion is to love in a world that teaches you to hate, to hope in a world that profits from despair, to create in a world that rewards destruction. It is to choose meaning over nihilism, connection over isolation, courage over resignation. You look to the horizon, the future shimmering with possibility. The journey is not over. The questions will never be fully answered. But you are no longer afraid. You have learned to trust the process, to embrace the uncertainty, to find meaning in the act of becoming. As the sun sets and the world is bathed in golden light, you feel a sense of completion, a circle closing, a story coming full circle. You are not the same person who began this journey. You have been changed, transformed, reborn. The psychology of rebellion has led you to the edge of yourself and beyond. You stand in the twilight, the world spread out before you, and you know that nothing will ever be the same. The ultimate truth is not a secret to be discovered, but a life to be lived, a continual act of rebellion, a daily choice to create, to love, to hope. You are haunted by the enormity of what remains undone, inspired by the beauty of what is possible, and radically rethinking your place in the world. The journey continues, the questions endure, the rebellion goes on. And as you take your next breath, you realize, this is what it means to be alive.